We want to welcome everyone to the annual Safe Environment in Service, especially all of our new ministers that are just starting the new catechetical and academic year. We thank you for your service. And because we want to ensure that things are done appropriately as we start off the new year, we have a team that will be joining us this morning, guiding us through the different components of safe environment compliance, and of course, the actual program to ensure that our students are safe. And so before we get started, again, if you're just logging in, make sure that you include your name in the chat along with your parish so that you receive credit for attendance this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we shall get started as we normally do in prayer. Let us begin. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Loving God, creator of all things, you call us to be in relationship with you and others. Thank you for calling these catechists, for the opportunity to share with others what has been given to them. May all those whom they share the gift of faith discover how you are present in all things. May they come to know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. May the grace of the Holy Spirit guide their hearts and lips so they may remain constant in loving and praising you. May they be witnesses to the gospel and ministers of your truth. May all their words and actions reflect your love. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Very good. So again, just a warm welcome to everyone for joining us. A couple of our presenters today that will be guiding us through different components about safe environment is Rodrigo Valdivia. He is the Vice Moderator of the Curia and Director for Child and Youth Protection. We also have Ann Radosevich, Director for Human Resources, Mary Acosta, Victim Assistance Coordinator, Maricruz Flores, Director for Youth Ministry. And we have Matthew Cordes, who's representing the Office for Schools this morning. Leticia Oseguera couldn't join us today. She's off-site attending a conference, but Matthew is representing the Office for Schools, and Noya as well. And yours truly, Marioli, serving as Chancellor and Director for Pastoral Ministries. So just a quick overview. This might be a refresher for some of you who have been in ministry for some years, but for others, it may be brand new information. So we ask that you type in the chat box throughout the presentation, any questions that may surface, anything that may not be clear or that you would like answered at the end of the presentation. We have a couple of questions that have surfaced and we will respond to those, but if there are any others, then please feel free to type in the chat anything that you need further clarification on. So to begin, we will be covering safe environment compliance and the importance of the 5-year renewal. Also, access to CMG Connect, the communications policy that was instituted a few years ago, protocols on mandated reporting, a quick review of the Safe in Our Diocese website and its resources, best practices for online ministry, and of course, ministry with our youth. And again, we will answer any questions you may have. So to get started, we will now begin with the component of safe environment compliance. And for that, I invite Rodrigo to lead us in that piece.
Thank you, Marioli. Can everybody see me or hear me? Good. Yes. All right. That's good because I can't see myself. Anyway, so yes, what I want to do briefly this morning is just go over, our program that, attempts to fulfill all the requirements for our safe environment. Hopefully all of you are already familiar with what we do for children, but I will review this. So for children, we are required, all our parishes and schools are required to provide the training to children using the No-Go-Tell program. The No-Go-Tell program is available on our website, on our Safe and Our Diocese website under resources. And there are resources there. There are the materials for each grade. You'll see a curriculum there for every grade, pre-K through 12. For each grade, there are materials. They're slightly adjusted to be age appropriate so that you can use the right grade for each one of the groups, okay? So there's a slight difference. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but as they move from year to year, we've tried to make them as age appropriate as possible. That's that third point. And just to emphasize, this has to be done with every grade, every year, okay? When we were, doing a lot of the programs on a remote basis, we still have to do them. Hopefully by now, we've all, or most of us have returned to on-site, and so we do it on-site. But if there's anybody that's still doing it remotely, they should be provided the training in some way or fashion.
Rodrigo, and also perhaps those families that homeschool, the same applies, correct?
Right. It applies to any children that participate in the program, even if they are in the homeschool program. At that point, the material has to be sent to the parents. They have to be encouraged to review that with the children as the instructor, that they're, the parents are the instructors in that case. So they would have to fulfill both the instructor portion and the parent portion. Thank you, Mario. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so when we do this, when we present this training, when we use the materials with the children, we need to document that we did this, okay? That you need to document that you've done that. Every single instructor at every single grade level should complete this verification of completion so that we have a record that the process took place. The instruction at the on-site location, so the introduction, as well as the eventual sending of the material to the parents. And so there's a form that's available there online for every instructor, youth minister, if that's the case, or whatever, to complete so that there is a record that the program was done with every student each year. And then this form needs to be retained on record at least until the parish review that happens every 3 years, or at least for 3 years. At the diocesan level, we get audited by the national office, and nowadays they're following like a 3-year cycle. So we want to make sure that we have the documentation for at least the past 3 years, and you should too, so that when there's a parish review and the reviewer arrives there and says, show me that you've done the safe environment requirements, you can pull up these forms and say, okay, this is when we did it, this is when we sent it, and hopefully there's good documentation for all of that.
Now, Rodrigo, regarding the documentation and keeping records, this applies for hard copies and also electronic.
Exactly.
Copies.
So whenever you do something electronically, you should keep a copy or some sort of documentation that was done. Mm-hmm. A copy of the email, a copy of the list, or something that indicates that this was actually done. Perhaps a sample of one of the people you copy yourself or copy somebody, so that you know that this was done and you can show that it was.
Very good. Thank you.
So as I just mentioned, the diocese is audited each year by the USCCB. When the bishops established or published, I should say, the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People, they instituted at the same time a system of audit to make sure that what they were committing to do would actually be done in every diocese across the country. So they have engaged these auditing firms, these third-party auditing firms, that on behalf of the Conference of Bishops, the National Conference of Bishops, come out to each diocese. And the audit is kind of done every year, but every 3rd year is actually when they go through everything and they look at the documentation and everything else. The in-between years, they ask us to just report that, that the program is being implemented, and report the numbers of children and adults that are complying with it. And we provide that. We ask, we poll the parishes and schools. And so we provide those numbers, but every 3rd year they come back and they look at it with a fine-tooth comb, make sure that everything is being correctly recorded, correctly done, and so on. So we're audited every year. Parishes undergo a review about every 3 years. So the policy for the diocesan offices, both the Office for Finance and Office for Human Resources, is to go out to parishes and undertake these reviews. Sometimes they're done a little bit sooner if there's a pastor change There's a review done at that time. Sometimes because of one thing or another, there's challenges that kind of intervene, and maybe it's not 3 years exactly, maybe it's 4 years, but the policy calls it to be done every 3 years. So we try to stick to that schedule and conduct these reviews, again, to help parishes make sure that everything that's being done, including the safe environment implementation, is being done correctly. All right, so what do you do then to prepare for these reviews as you are always doing this implementation and the training of children? So again, you make sure that all of the catechists are doing the program, presenting the program to their students every year. You make sure that you keep the verification forms, that you put them together in a accessible place. Somebody has to know where they are, and kept for the parish reviewers. Okay, you make sure that number 3 here, the materials are sent to all the parents. So the program involves a presentation to the students on site at all the grade levels, and then sending the materials to the parents. We used to require that these materials be sent through the United States Postal Service, so that would be a record, and we'd have a receipt for $300 worth of stamps or whatever, that we could show that we sent it to them. The Diocesan Review Board has recently agreed that it's okay to send this stuff by email, as long as we keep a somewhat reliable record that these emails were sent to all the parents. Okay, so we have to be able to show we have a list of emails, and that an email was sent to all the parents on such and such a date. So whether you continue to send it via the U.S. Postal Service, or you send it electronically in some way, you have to ideally be able to show that this material was farmed out to the parents, because our program really relies on the parents undertaking part of this instruction with their children. So we send these questions to the parents to discuss with their children. We engage them in this process. The parents really, as we all know, the primary educators of children, and we rely on that position for them to undertake and complete this program. So it's very important that this material arrive and be sent to the parents, and be sent to all of them. Because if we can send it to all of them, we can say, with a straight face, we provided this material to all of them. At the end of the day, whether or not they end up doing something about it with their children or not, well, we can't force them, but at least we provided it to them, and we're able to say that. All right, so then we need to keep track that all the catechists and other volunteers establish a CMG Connect profile and complete the requirements. This is moving into the compliance portion of the adults. Okay, so the first 3 are requirements that we have to deal with for children. Number 4 now moves into making sure that catechists and volunteers are on the CMG Connect and complete the requirements that are set for adults. Okay.
Yes. Now, Rodrigo, just to emphasize number 3 again, because that is one of the newest updates. In the past, we had given instruction that only things needed to be mailed, because that was the one way you could track. But a couple of ideas that come to mind, especially when you're trying to prove that you sent an email to parents. One is, if you're using Flocknote, then you have an actual proof that the person opened it or didn't open it. So you might be able to do that. But one item would be, if you send the email, just keeping a copy, correct, Rodrigo, of the email of the family, and just logging.
Absolutely. And if you have, again, I don't think the auditors are going to ask us to show them how many opened and how many didn't, but the point is, we sent it to them. So we have to have, we have to be able to show them our Flocknote list. This is the Flocknote list for the 3rd grade, students in religious education. And on such and such a date, this email was sent to that list. If we can do that, that clearly satisfies the requirement. Obviously, it would be good for people to kind of track to see, how many of these emails are being opened, because maybe down the line, if we are discovering that 80% don't go open, then we may have to rethink this process. But for now, it's okay to try to use it. We're hoping that that is something. I mean, we rely for many things on email and for communication. So that's what the review board understood, and base this decision to say, okay, let's try it and see how it works.
Excellent.
All right, so again, there's kind of two sides to this coin. One is, our effort to implement the requirement, and then the other side of the coin is our effort to verify that we are implementing the requirements or doing so. That's why we're talking about the audits, and that's what we're talking about now, this annual statistic report. This is the way we're verifying that what we're supposed to be doing is actually being done. And so every year, we try to remind people sometime in March, late February or March, that, hey, remember, you have a statistical report coming due at the end of the year. And so you have to be putting together these statistics and so on. And then in July, actually in June, we send out the actual notice of the report. We moved to a process that is actually online. Okay, so we send you the report. We tell you that you need to fill it out sometime in July. We send a link so that you can go online. Actually, we send it to the pastor. So we send a notice in our flag note message communication to the pastors, telling them that, we are going to need someone at your parish, a site administrator or someone else that's responsible at the parish or school to do this, to complete this form. And so there's a link, there's a form online that requests all this information. It requests, how many children were in the program, and the religious education program, how many, young people were in the youth program, and so on. And then it, asks you to tell there how many received the training in accord with the policy. So there's a number of questions there that in that form that need to be completed. Whoever goes online to complete the form, once they enter the information and click submit, they're done. The system automatically then sends us a notification that you have finished that. I believe you get a email too saying thank you for finishing that, you're done, and we're able to gather that information so that we can compile it and be ready for the response that we submit to the national auditor. So it's important that someone at each parish be attentive to this annual statistic report. Try to get it done in July. By the end of July, early August, we start to remind people, okay, we need your response, so that we can have our our report to the national office ready. All right, let's move into this thing. Now, let's move to from children to adults. So this is the safe environment requirements for adults, just for everyone to be aware. So who is required? Who at our parishes and schools is required to comply? Which adults? Okay, now when we're talking adults, we're talking everybody who has celebrated their 18th birthday and beyond. Okay, the moment that anyone celebrates their 18th birthday, for this purpose, we consider them an adult, and they're required to comply with these. They may act very childish, we know those people, but sorry, we have to treat them as adults, okay? And so we have to remember that, okay? Now, they may be young people involved in a program still under the supervision of older adults, but if they're over 18, they have to be treated as adults. All right, so who must comply? All priests, deacons, diocesan school, and parish staff, okay, so priests, deacons, and staff at parishes and schools, as well as all volunteers whose work involves minors, okay? Now, this is a little bit of a trick here when, deciding which volunteers work involved. The way that we say it is, if your job description is, geared towards minors, that you're a volunteer, that, your job description is a volunteer. If it involves geared towards minors, then you're required to comply. So if you're an usher at a mass, that doesn't put you into that level of requirement, okay? Because it's not saying that you're an usher at the children's mass, for example. If you're an usher at the children's mass, yes, all of a sudden your job description involves minors, and so you have to do it. But all ushers, all Eucharistic ministers, no. Only if you are clearly geared towards minors, okay? So anyone whose work, playground supervisor, driver for youth events or whatever, If it's clearly that's for youth and for minors, then all those volunteers need to comply. Obviously, catechists, catechetical aides, all those things. So those are obvious. But some of the other ones, you just have to think, is your job description clearly geared towards youth? If that's the case, you need to comply. All right. So that's the definition of the who. And now, once everyone is in those groups, or anyone that's in a group, what must they do? Well, they have to complete the training program. It's it's an education program, and then also undergo a background screening. Okay, this for most people is done. Both of these requirements are done on CMG Connect. Okay, and so that's why people need to go in and establish a CMG Connect profile, and then proceed to fulfill the requirements. Let's go to the next slide. I think that's in there. All right, so this is what what happens. So you go into CMG Connect, you establish a profile, and I'm probably preaching to the choir because most of you probably already have done this, but just in case we catch it one or two, employees must establish a profile and complete the requirements during the first several days. Okay, for employees, this is crucial. We cannot have someone working, being compensated at a parish for longer than just a few days before they finish this. In particular, because this is where the background screening is going to be conducted, and if there's anything in their history that indicates it shouldn't be there, we need to know sooner rather than later. Okay. Volunteers, on the other hand, they can do it before they start because they're not getting paid. There's no how would I say contract or agreement there. So when people are signing up as volunteers, they should be sent to CMG Connect. They should finish this so that when they start doing their work, they have already been in compliance. Is it the end of the world if somebody comes in on a one day? Well, we try to avoid it. It's not the end of the world, but you got to get it done. Again, this is an effort that we are making to protect children. And we need to make sure that everyone that's an adult that's working with children is in compliance, because that's how we diminish the possibility that anyone will be abused, that anyone will be given, or will be put in a position to abuse children, and all those things. So that's got to be our mindset. Okay, our mindset is we are always doing everything that we can to protect the children that are participating in our programs. Okay, and so to the extent that we can comply with all of these things, the better. All right, now once you've done this once, our policy calls that 5 years later you have to do this again. Okay, so people that did it more than 5 years ago, they've already had to do a 5-year recertification. People that did it 4 years ago, well, they're coming up in 1 year for a recertification. So we've worked with CMG Connect to implement a program where people can go back into their CMG profile and then recertify. There are new videos for the training program. They still have to read the Code of Ethical Standards. That hasn't changed. And then they have to undertake a new background check. Okay, so that again, we make sure every 5 years that everybody that's in the system is still good to go, still keeping our children safe. So once you go into the CMG Connect, you'll see that there are new training videos to view, and then you'll be given the opportunity to put in the information for a background check. There's a couple of glitches here and there when people take too long. We're working through those. If they, you get a notification, I believe 60 days in advance, saying, okay, within 60 days, you have to recertify, this is your 5-year recertification thing. So we're hoping that most people within those 60 days will do that. When people don't do that, and you get to pass the deadline, that introduces some challenges, and we're working through those. But hopefully for most people, you'll be able to recertify and just move on and be done. Okay. Now, if for some reason you get late or you hear somebody, hey, that I can't go in anymore, a solution is not to set up a whole new profile, because that's going to create more problems than it's going to solve. Okay. So work with your site administrator, call us here. We'll walk you through what to do if you've been locked out for some reason, if you weren't able to do it. for a 60-day. Currently, I believe we have a little grace period that people can still do it, but even then, there are people that go beyond that grace period. So again, ideally, things will work in the way they're supposed to, but if somebody gets too late and gets locked out, then you need to contact us.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rodrigo. If you have any questions on this segment, please jot that in the box. I think we've covered quite a bit, establishing the expectations of the safe environment compliance for children and adults. We're going to go ahead and start with the next part, and this is access to the actual CMG database. And so for that, we welcome Ann Radosevich.
Great. Thank you so much, Marioli. I think Rod just gave an excellent overview of what the program is all about. But now, how do you get there? As you know, the Safe Environment Training is two components. They watch a series of safe environment training videos. There's just wonderful vignettes in there. And as Rod has indicated, they've been updated. So there's new information out there. Also, we're going to ask them to read the Code of Ethical Standards that follows the video. I know all of you have done this. And of course, do the background check. So, you know, at the parishes, it's pretty easy for everyone to keep, going a little too, that's okay. It's pretty easy for all of us to keep track of the employees. That's not a problem. Where we run into a snag is with the volunteers, because the volunteers come and go. Every location has what we call a location administrator. It's either going to be the business manager or the secretary or bookkeeper at your location. They are the ones that have access to CMG. So they don't know, because most of you work in the evenings or on weekends, and they may not know when you have a volunteer come or they volunteer leave. So you are the best person to help us with the volunteers. And so that's where you come in. Okay. They will just go, of course, to the website, as Rod indicated, to sandiego.cmgconnect. And there's instructions that the volunteers can follow, and it's step by step. It's really very easy. It's very similar to exactly what you have done. If someone needs that in Spanish, if they're more comfortable there as opposed to English, that's available to them. There's a little drop down. They can identify that they wish to take the training in Spanish, and that will get them started. Next slide, please. So what they do after they go into CMG Connect, all of your new employees, we need them to register for a new account. What they do, and a problem that we've had, is that not everyone uses their correct legal name. So we are asking everyone that registers in a new account to use the name exactly as it appears on your Social Security card. In other words, my name, I'm Ann Radosevich. But if my legal name is Angelica Radosevich, and I just put in Ann because that's what everybody calls me, they're not going to make the connection on the background check. We then are going to have to reach out to the location. They're going to have to reach out to you, and then we're going to have to find the correction and get back in touch with CMG. It's just a whole lot easier if they do it right the first time. So when you're giving instructions, be sure to stress it needs to be the name as it appears on the Social Security card. Now, as Rod indicated, we are doing this training, and we're required to do this training every 5 years. Well, we're in our 5th year. So some of those individuals who have been with you for a while now, they're going to be receiving emails that they need to do this training. They may say to you, oh, no, I did that a couple of years ago. I'm already all set. Well, 5 years comes and goes pretty darn quickly. And so, no, they have to redo it. So as Rod said, please don't register for a new account, but go into the existing accounts and click sign in. Now, if you're like me, and many of your volunteers are, they're going to forget what the heck was my username and my password. So CMG accounts for people like us, and they give you the opportunity to say, I forgot my password. I forgot my username, and CMG will retrieve that for them. Okay, next slide, please. As we've indicated, all locations have an administrator that is responsible for ensuring that your parish is compliant with the safe environment requirements. They have access to view all of the accounts and to verify that everyone is completed. As we've said, the problem is that they don't know when your volunteers come and go. So this is where you come in. Coordinate with them, give them a list, or in some of the larger locations where you have a lot of activity, we can provide you with access so that you can stay on top of this and keep track of your own volunteers. But if you don't want to do that, or your location doesn't want to do that, that's fine. But it's really important that you work with them to keep them advised. So if they say, yeah, we'd love for you to take access and be responsible for your volunteers, you can see all the way down at the bottom of that slide, Nilbert, he is responsible for CMG coordination with all of the parishes. He'll be able to take care of that. Just have your location administrator reach out to them and he'll take good care of you. So as we said, all the volunteers who work with children, we need their compliance. So the location administrator or you will go through and ensure that every active volunteer is up to date. Now, you may have somebody that says, you know what, I've done this for a while, but I need to take a year or two off. And that happens. And that's okay, but we don't want you to remove them from your roster. We would like you to go ahead and archive them, because going through the CMG training and the background check, it does cost money. It's not horribly expensive, but all of us continue to be good stewards of the resources that have been entrusted to us. So you don't want to remove that person. You want to put them into your archive so that hopefully next year they come back and you're going to be able to retrieve them without going through the training again. Likewise, if someone has gone through the training at another location, but they're also volunteering with you, that's okay. We can add them to your secondary list so that when we look at all of your volunteers, we can say, yes, that person also has cleared safe environment. So I know this sounds like a whole lot of work, and it really is a lot of work. And so I'm thanking you in advance for your assistance with this. It truly is an important piece of protecting the children in our diocese. So thank you so much. And Rod, I think I'm turning this back over to you to talk about electronic communications.
Yes, thank you, Anne. And also, for those of you that don't know who your site administrator is, maybe that's a homework assignment for you to find out who that is. And that way you can have that constant communication with that individual at your parish site.
Marioli?
Yes.
Marioli, would you mind if I just offered one reminder, please?
Yes.
When you have new catechists who are signing up for a profile in CMG, sometimes they think that because they're teaching students, they should call themselves educators. That is a designation that is only for the schools. So catechists should be either volunteers, most likely, or if they're on the payroll, they should be employees, but they should not be educators. It really makes a difference to our safe environment stats at the end of the year. Just wanted to put that reminder out.
Sure. No, thank you. And that's part of one of the FAQs at the end to kind of memorialize that important distinction, because we understand that you might get confused. Well, I teach, so I guess I'm an educator too, but really that is only for the Catholic schools. But thank you for reminding us, Anne. Wonderful. So we'll continue on with the electronic communications policy, which was instituted a couple years ago. So Rodrigo, if you'd like to expand a little bit on this. You're on mute, Rodrigo.
All right, great, thank you. So yes, so a couple years back, maybe now about 3, we established a new policy that deals with electronic communications between ministers. And again, now we're talking about adult ministers with minors. Okay, so this is again key. That's why it's important to remember always when we're talking someone over 18 and someone under 18, and that this applies to them. So when communicating with minors, adult ministers must always, to every extent possible, use the organization. In other words, use the parish or school platform for communicating. Now we have Flocknote for for many of us. There are other platforms that other parishes and schools may have implemented, and so it's important that you use only that organization. In other words, not your private or personal email or other social media, platform. And again, this goes to everybody, so that people need to be aware that that's what we're expecting all ministers to follow. There isn't a kind of like a carve out or an exception. You have a different, social media account and you can use that for something else. No, ministers, when communicating with minors at their parish or school, have to use the parish or school platform. All right. So ideally, that will provide then visibility, so that the parents and other adults can see what the communication that is being sent between that adult minister and the minor. Okay, again, this is how we keep that communication safe. And then all adults in ministry are asked to immediately inform their supervisor if there's ever any improper communication from the youth. This might be an indication something else is going on, some other steps need to be taken, and so it's important to then communicate it up the chain of command. Don't just ignore it, because that might be, kind of being negligent about something that really needs to be done. Okay. Again, so this applies, like I just mentioned, every sort of social media network. These things pop up, almost daily, and young people are keen to adopt the various ones as they come up, because they have attractive features or whatever. So whatever it is that they're using, that they send you or invite you to, as an adult, you need to stick to the ones that the organization, the parish or school has implemented for communicating with parishioners. Okay, it applies to text messaging. We all have text messaging on our devices. Goes to, so private text messaging is probably not a good idea. Well, it's definitely not something that falls within what we would accept as proper communication, appropriate communication between an adult minister and a minor thing. It applies to email, same thing. It always has to be something that other people, whether it is superiors in your situation or the parents, in the case of the minors, have access to. Okay, and so the policy is it's very well explained. It's part of what we now expect everyone to read as part of the training program when you go into CMG. And so it's important to follow this communication policy there. I can tell you that, we get very, very few, accusations that ministers have actually done, committed sexual crimes with their children or students. Unfortunately, we do get one or two every once in a while. We get more of these. Parents complaining, hey, I got my kid was getting messages from the youth minister or from a teacher or coach or whatever. So we get these, we take them seriously, we make sure that everybody is following the communications policy.
Wonderful, Rodrigo. Thank you so much for that. And again, that information can also be found on our diocesan website in case you have any questions about what platforms can be utilized that actually permit for multiple adults to be on that same thread of communication. We're trying to create an ethos that we are always being, not that we're being watched, but we have obviously multiple people caring for the safeguard of not only the minister, but also the students as well. Okay, great. Moving on to the next component on mandated reporting. This also comes in line with the presentation that Rodrigo mentioned a moment ago that we held at USD a couple of years ago. We instituted this process of mandated reporting for church ministers, but volunteers. And to expand on this is Mary Acosta. So I invite you, Mary, to join us.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm glad you're here. And so what I'll be talking about, like Marioli said, is the mandated reporting aspect of your jobs. And the USCCB, this little graphic here that's their, their slogan is the promise to protect children from now on, and pledge to heal. So what I primarily do is work on the healing of victims who and those who've been abused by clergy. But you all would fit in protecting children further and being vigilant to, signs of grooming and of abuse in the church and with those outside of the church. So I'm just going to give a little bit of overview really of what is child abuse, and forgive me if this is stuff you already know, but it's always good to keep in mind, really what is abuse and how does it manifest itself in a child. So it involves, generally the federal definition is usually defined as a recent act or a failure to act on a part of a parent or caregiver, which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, and or an act of failure to act in which it presents an imminent risk of serious harm. So again, harming a child, exploiting a child in terms of pornography, in terms of physical abuse, so hitting, slapping, punching, whatever that might involve, sexual abuse, obviously incest, exploitation of them, and sharing photos of children, emotional abuse. That's a little harder to see if you're a minister, but if you find someone is emotionally just really up and down or closed off, that could be a sign of that. Corporal punishment resulting in a traumatic condition, that is part of the consideration of abuse. Corporal punishment in and of itself is not, but if it traumatizes a child, like to punish them, they strap them to a tree and whack them with something, that is a traumatic condition. Neglect is also, so for the little ones, parents who are gone all the time, who don't pick them up, who don't meet their basic needs, that's considered neglect. And again, as Rod said from the very beginning, a child is officially someone under 18. So even 16 and 17-year-old, very mature young people are considered children under the law. So boundary crossings, we get a lot of questions about this. There's a lot more awareness of boundaries and crossing those. So in and of itself, it's not considered abuse. You can't report, this is kind of suspicion, but it could be part of a grooming pattern that leads to abuse. So y'all have to always be aware of that. Social media communications, that's where it kind of starts. Cell phone communications, people are always texting or sending pictures. Outside of work interaction, again, if you have a minister who's kind of going with one person outside of work, discussing personal issues, an adult discussing personal issues with a youth, and the other way around, just something to keep an eye on. Keeping secrets, those are always just things that might be of concern to you to keep in mind and keep an eye on if you see these things going on between an adult and a child. Cultural diversity and recognizing child abuse. I think this is always important to keep in mind, because different cultures, especially maybe recent immigrants who come to the States, they're not always totally aware of the acceptation or lack of accepting certain things that in their culture are ways to discipline your children. Pulling their ear, whacking them in the back of the head. These things might also, their economic status, their religion, their culture, slapping them, whacking on the butt. That's what my parents did. And if it was really bad, they would pull our pants down and whack us on a bare butt. That was acceptable back then. Now, it may be questioned. But focus on understanding the individuals, where they're at, why they're maybe doing this. Don't label it right away until you understand. The law does not exempt cultural practices, though, from reporting requirements if it's abusive. So if you do see a child maybe more than once come in with a bruise, with, really bad welts on their body or something that you're saying, hey, someone used a switch on them, or a board, which like Texas is now allowing that, I think, in some places to punish with boards, then you might want to, you know, have a discussion. So reporting abuse, it's quite easy. It's the law, basically. I underlined these and these yellow parts. A mandated reporter, that's you all. You are mandated because of your position, working specifically with children. So any mandated under the law who has knowledge of or observes, so you have to see it or you have to hear it in their professional capacity, so in your role as a DCM, within the scope of your work, your employment, if you are employed, that you know or reasonably suspect has been a victim. So you know this child, you need to report to a designated agency immediately. So as soon as you're made aware of this, you need to report it by telephone. And we'll show you a little bit in a minute, the next slide, where, and report it written if they request that. So it is a two-step process within 36 hours. So really you got a day, maybe 2 days to make this full report. So mandated reporters, as I mentioned before, many job classifications, not everyone is mandated by law, but teachers, instructional aides, coaches, administrators, employees with direct contact with children, they are all mandated. Volunteers, though, as mentioned, you know, in our staff day, we really reiterated, and Cardinal McElroy had said this, that anyone who volunteers, anyone who works with children directly are considered ethical reporters. So ethically, we all are have the responsibility to help the diocese, help the church, help our communities to assist in the protection of youth and vulnerable adults as well. And so we are all called to report. If you have any church volunteer who maybe is not officially a mandated reporter, they should consult with the person in the church who is an employee to decide who will report. This is something that sometimes gets tricky. A volunteer says, I have this suspicion that this may be happening. Speak with the DCM or the youth minister or the pastor. Doesn't take the responsibility away from the volunteer, but it just streamlines it within your parish reality. So pastors always need to know too, when there is an abuse report being, you know, sent. And I will say too that within the church, we don't have that many cases annually, you know, of suspected abuse by ministers, but much more, and especially because of COVID, you may see and suspect things happening by family members or friends of the children. So that's something to keep in mind, because you guys are going to, you know, be involved with them at least once a week, and so you may be aware of maybe some family dynamics that might not be healthy. So again, reasonable suspicion of abuse that involves physical signs or harm, signs of neglect, coming in smelly, clothes all beat up, hungry all the time. You receive a disclosure of abuse or a serious boundary violation from someone. So they tell you this happened to me. Even if it's historical, it's important to know what to do with it. A gut feeling's not reasonable. You just kind of sense something, but it has to really be paired with some objective observations. And when in doubt, you can always call Child Protective Services, but also, especially for those tricky situations with like an 18 or 19-year-old youth minister and a 16-year-old doing something, you may say, do I need to report this? The Diocesan Civil Affairs Office, Bill Nolan, he would be a good person to consult just before, you know, you take the next step. So here's to make a report. Again, if the child is in immediate danger, like you see this kid come in and they're just, or you know the suspicious person is boyfriend of mom, and that kid's gonna have to go back to that person, call 911. The police will react more immediately than Child Protective Services. Very important part. If there's any immediate danger, call 911. So if not, follow these instructions. They're in our little brochure here. It's a two-step process. Again, call child welfare in Imperial Valley. There's a different number than San Diego. Make the report. But if the alleged perpetrator is a church employee, you need to call Ann Radosevich. She's the HR director and needs to be the person who responds on behalf of the diocese. It doesn't mean you don't make a report. It's just that she'd like to know about this. And if it's a clergy member, call me, because that is a very serious and something we do take very seriously. And it does include different steps, once an allegation is made. For everybody else, make the report, keep a record of the report and in the parish, and inform your pastor. Okay, here's the form. It's it's online. After you make a call to Child Welfare Services, if you ever do, then they actually will send you a link. If they receive the report, they'll send you a link to fill out this form online. That's a new thing. Local law enforcement is usually the one who will investigate. Child Welfare Services, if it happens within a family, in the house, Child Welfare Services is the one to investigate. Police might do it if it happened at the boyfriend's house or somewhere else. The police usually investigate, just so you know. Okay, and let's not forget vulnerable adults. Under the law, vulnerable adults are also protected against abuse. So if you are, I'm just saying this, it's not because of your job working with children, but in terms of in the home, in your parish community, anyone over 18 who's physically or emotionally unable to care for themselves can be considered under the law as a vulnerable adult. Usually they're people who need help with daily activities. They might have mental or developmental disabilities. They may have had an acute trauma, their caregiver died, or they also may share common vulnerabilities with vulnerable children, which includes uncertain resources at home, divorce, loss of family member, no support system, very common, chronic illness, psychological harassment. So these, anything suspected abuse, a lot of times these are older people. These are people who are maybe homeless also. They may be people who don't have a lot of support and may have mental health issues. Those are to be reported to Adult Protective Services. And in terms of reporters, I'm just going to say this, there is safeguards for anybody who reports. When sometimes people say, is this a confidential process? And the identity of the reporter is confidential. This being said, supervisors cannot also under the law impede or sanction anybody who reports. So if you are reporting against someone within your community, there is sanctions against anybody who is causing problems because of that. There's no civil liability, so you can't be sued because you reported and it led to something else. This being said, there's also penalties if later they find out you didn't report, but you should have as a mandated reporter. And again, you could lose your license if you're a therapist or something. And there's some fines and things. So resources related to this, on the right-hand side, you'll see this is our Safe in Our Diocese website. I don't think I can go there, no. Yeah, you can find all kind of great materials and resources there, information about how to report, where, our brochures in there in Vietnamese and Spanish and English, contact information for all the different important offices. And also we do have a published list of accused priests. So it's a good resource if anyone's looking up, you know, a certain priest who may have abused them in the past. There's also Catholic Bishop Abuse Reporting Service. So if there's any accusation of abuse or failure to report, that is on our website, as well as this other information and victim support resources. And yeah, and basically you all just remember you're the eyes and ears that protect children from abuse and stop it if it is happening. It happens, sadly, you know, it happens in our communities. Keep an eye out for it always. Ministers need to be just aware, just be aware, be vigilant, you know, of the possibilities. Take action immediately when you see something happening. We will support you in this process. And ultimately, remember, our goal is to protect children. And so thank you for all you do. And I know this is a difficult aspect of it, but it's just being aware. Stay aware and don't forget that it can always happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I know this was quite a bit of a portion of the safe environment, but it is also a very important role that we all have as mandated reporters. So it's good to have these refresher reminders, but also to know what the process entails in case we ever find ourselves in the need to report abuse. Okay, so now we're going to move into the practical aspect of safe environment. And for that, I invite Maricruz Flores.
Thank you, Marioli. Good morning, everybody. So a few tips for ministers. We know in the last year or so, we have shifted from online to in-person now. There aren't as many restrictions as we had last year in 2020. So there are a few tips just as a refresher, especially for those who are new in ministry, just kind of how to deal with your students, catechists, whatever it may be. First and foremost, set time for prayer for yourself as ministers and for your catechists. There's a lot of times where it's the beginning of the catechetical year, we want to hit the ground running and we forget to pray before we plan big events, before we plan retreats, before we start confirmation classes, CCD, whatever it may be. And so it's very important for you to start prayer, to begin with prayer for you, your catechist at a time. It's okay if on Sundays you want to go to mass at a different parish other than the one you have a key for. It's totally fine to set aside that time for prayer for yourself. Ensure that you have set guidelines for your in-person gatherings now that we're fully back in person. Make sure you set your expectations for not only your catechists, but the parents, the families, the young people that you're ministering to. For example, if you're going to have confirmation interviews with your students, either at the beginning or at the end of the year, and if it's going to be one-on-one, make sure it's in an open space. You let someone know, I'm going to interview the student one-on-one, have open doors. So we're also following safe environment protocols. Make sure that if you are going to have makeup classes for your students, that you're very clear in these guidelines that, you know, you can have up to 2 or 3 makeup classes, whatever your program calls for, whether it be in combined classes, it can be one-on-one, but if you just want to combine them with another class, that's fine. It's up to how you do your program. The following point, be on time and be prepared. One of the biggest complaints I get from youth ministers and DCMs as well is at the end of the day, kids are just calling their parents just when class ends to come pick them up. Make sure you let your parents know class ends at 8:30 p.m. It ends at 8 p.m. Please be prompt to pick up your students because we run into the issues of sometimes parents taking half an hour. I've heard of cases where youth ministers are outside waiting till 10 p.m. for parents to come pick up their students. So just make sure that this is very clear for parents so the students aren't calling their parents just when class ends and then you're there waiting. So make sure that's very clear. Other things, if you would like to offer prepackaged snacks for your kids, water stations, encourage the kids to bring their own water bottles. A lot of us have often wonder why, especially teenagers, are so moody when it could be something as basic as they're hungry. So offer a nice environment for them, have snacks for them, encourage them to bring their own water bottles, just so, you know, we're able to help out Father Emmett and his Laudato Si cause for the creation care team. So let's keep that in our minds too, to be environmentally conscious. The next one, make sure to train your catechist on best practices now that we're back in person. For example, if the technology fails, the PowerPoint isn't working, is there a plan B? Can we have an extra icebreaker? Is there something that we can maybe have the kids read or have a moment of sharing how their week was in case, you know, we have to wait for the technology to kick back in or if it doesn't work. Another thing, and we did bring this up a few years ago when COVID first started, was to make sure you have a first aid kit somewhere available for your catechist, for yourself, that is easily accessible. Have copies of emergency contacts for all catechists, especially now that we have more kids that are coming forward with allergies. Make sure that we're also conscious of that too. And because we live in California, if there is a fire drill or an earthquake drill, if you could have a plan of point of meeting in case, God forbid, there's an emergency. Where can we meet the catechists and the students outside of parish grounds, wherever you're meeting? This next one, the tips for ministers. So share the expectations with your students on proper behavior, what disciplinary actions will be taken should there be misconduct. In the last couple of years, this is something that's also come up in youth ministry. Now that our students are coming out post-pandemic, they've had a couple of years on Zoom. A lot of them are a little bit behind on that development when it comes to behavior. So it's also good to be clear with the parents, with the students, that if they do misbehave, a suggestion would be to offer them a verbal warning. The second, we can tell them, okay, if something happens again, you're going to get a call home. Third one, we meet with your parents. It's always good to have a pastoral approach when we're addressing behavioral issues, because there could be something deep-rooted, like Mary was saying. We have to be very vigilant. We have to be aware of why these behavioral issues could be taking place, whether it's abuse or they're just simply hungry because they are teenagers. So it's something that we have to be vigilant of why there could be behavioral issues. The next one. Now, if you do plan to continue a hybrid model or an online model, whether it be for homeschooling, for special needs students, make sure that there's always 2 catechists on that video conferencing call on Zoom, as we would do with in-person sessions. So if you are continuing with that hybrid model, make sure that we do have 2 catechists. Same thing with the online model. If you're going to follow that and you're going to do breakout sessions, make sure that you visit break room by break room, just like you would in person as a youth minister, a DCM, DRE, visiting the classrooms, make sure everything's okay. Do the same thing with your breakout room sessions. And finally, set the meeting settings to public chat remarks, so catechist teachers can easily monitor with the students, how they're interacting, and make sure that only the host is able to share the screen. And then for the last one, tips to share with students. And we have a lot, like I said, we're coming back in person. We're getting to know our students. We're trying to build the relationships. So it's always good, like I said before, it's good to share the expectations with your students on what proper behavior is, what the disciplinary actions are going to be with them and their parents. Students should be dressed appropriately. We've seen the return of the crop top for a lot of these young ladies. We've seen the boys showing up in tank tops. So it's always good to address this beforehand. Make sure that the students are dressed appropriately. They're ready for class. Please to let our parents know how important it is for them to be dressed appropriately for class, especially if they're attending mass as well. A lot of our catechists here, our youth ministers, are going to go over the safe environment training, whether it be the PowerPoint slides for the high schoolers or the no-go tell. But it's always good to rely the importance of being safe online and in person. We know, and we talked about this, the importance of social media in young people's lives, and how it's always good to be safe online, not to share personal information. If something were to happen where there's bullying going on online or in person, to make sure they tell an adult right away. It's always good to start off the year by letting them know, this is a safe space, whether the student was, their mom brought them to the program, whatever it may be. They may not happy to be there, but starting off with, this is a safe space. This is a church. We are here for you. You are not alone. Please share if there's something that's going on with them. Like I said, with the online presence, never share any personal information. or an identifiable information. A lot of students like to put their birth year on their usernames, whatever it may be. They like to share their location with their friends. We try to deter from that because it could become a dangerous situation, like Mary was saying, where there's exploitation, there is trafficking, and we want to make sure that the kids are as safe as possible. When it comes to online with our students, not to tag friends without prior consent on social media. A lot of the students, they'll get to know each other in the programs, youth ministry programs. They'll add each other on their social medias, and they'll start tagging themselves. It's always a good rule of thumb to ask for consent before you share anything on social media. We do that for our students. We have them sign the photo video release, and we should also let our students know that they should also be practicing the same thing, always asking for consent before they tag or post their friends. And of course, the golden rule, be courteous, respectful, and be kind to others. I think that goes a long way with our students. Now that we're in person, we're interacting with one another. The last couple of suggestions I have for all ministers who are with our young people is, invite the youth to set up the altar, invite them to be a part of creating an environment for them, for their fellow students. Start with icebreakers or games to kind of ease the youth into the new environment, especially at the beginning of the year. We know our students right now have a lot of anxieties. A lot of them have social anxiety. They don't know how to interact with each other. I mean, if we can get them to make eye contact, that's a miracle in and of itself. And so when we're able to start with games, getting to know each other, it eases the students into this new environment, especially if this is the first time back for them since their first communion. Dedicate a wall of Post-its for prayer intentions. It's always fun to see walls with different multicolored Post-its. The kids can put up prayer intentions for their friends or family members themselves. And it's something that they can see and they can be a part of. Another suggestion is, and I'm a fan of this one, is prayer pals. Start having the students write each other letters, postcards, of course, make sure that everything is able to be seen so there's no bullying going on. But have them send each other letters, postcards. It's always great to put pen to paper instead of sending a text to their friends, but actually having that personal relationship with one another to help them ease into this environment of ministry, of pastoral care as well. And then make sure you select the students beforehand to say opening and closing prayer. One of the big things that we're noticing now is, like I mentioned, a lot of social anxiety. And so if you pick a student right off the bat without giving them a warning, they may shut down. So it's always good to pick them beforehand for opening and closing prayer, giving them time to practice so they don't get nervous or shut down. It's one of the things, like I said, that we've noticed with anxiety running high in our young people, to make sure that we give them the time to really take a deep breath, realize what they're doing, and participating in class. And of course, a few last ideas. I mean, human bingo is always a favorite. I know as adults, we love these icebreakers. Have them do scavenger hunts, whether it's on Instagram or a traditional, you can play this or that, or fruit salad, which is, it's a fun version of musical chairs. So there's a lot of ideas that you can have with your students, have a lot of fun getting to interact with them. But most importantly, a place where they feel at home, they feel safe, and they're able to get to know one another. And that is all I have for our students for best practices.
Wonderful, Maricruz. Thank you so much for those great and very helpful tips, especially as we're kicking off the new year. It's a little hard sometimes, as you mentioned, to really engage our students. We want to make sure that they start off the year right. So these are great ideas that I hope our ministers will really apply as we begin. So that concludes the bulk of the presentation of Safe Environment. We've gone through various components. Now we're going to get into questions, and we have listed a few questions that are very, very common, and we're going to go through those responses with you. But in addition, we want to also respond to any questions that were left outstanding that perhaps surfaced as you listen to all of our presenters. So we'll get started with the very first question, which is, for an outside campus event, this applies mainly for like youth ministry and perhaps confirmation retreats and whatnot, how many adult volunteers do I need? The response to that, and quoting here, educational ministry policy, when sponsoring a youth activity off parish premises, there must be one adult chaperone per 10 adolescents. In overnight events, there must be a minimum of one adult chaperone sleeping in each of the rooms where the youth sleep. We highly suggest that there be 2 adults per group in the cabin and dorm. Anything else that you want to add to that or elaborate on, Maricruz?
No, I think this covers it. So it is 1 adult chaperone per 10 teens. But we do highly suggest for them to be 2.
Okay, very good. Just to keep safe, again, creating that ethos that you're being very conscientious of that, that environment that we're trying to have. Okay, question number 2. What happens at youth group if your adult volunteers don't show up that day and you are by yourself? Well, that tends to happen on occasions. Maricruz's advice is do your best. It's not the end of the world. Learn from the experience and be more proactive and plan for the future scheduled events for extra volunteers, extra support. And then, of course, just checking to see if they're able to confirm their participation on the day of the event. Just being, again, very cautious and proactive in that respect. Okay, question number 3. Can you talk about the videos we need to show the confirmation students about safe environment? Well, there are no videos, but there is a PowerPoint presentation that is shared with high school students. And as Rodrigo mentioned in his section of the presentation, everything is age appropriate. So you're not going to find PowerPoint presentations for the younger students, but you will find them from grades 9 through 12. But there isn't a video per se for students in high school or for confirmation. Question 4, how do we safe environment for retreat, particularly when it comes to bedtime and sleeping or keeping the youth safe? I know this has been one of those concerns because of the overnight component. But again, recommendation, make sure all chaperones and volunteers are safe environment compliant through CMG. Chaperones should support the youth minister in making sure that the youth adhere to the bedtime and the retreat schedule. And again, we suggest adults only sleep in the bottom bunks and near the door, as mentioned before in the previous question. Okay, question number 5. What do we do with individuals without a social security number? This is something that comes up occasionally in our parishes. Individuals who are not able to be cleared because of invalid documentation cannot serve with minors. However, they can serve along with someone who is fully compliant. And our recommendation is if they can serve in some other capacity with adults, that's preferred. But if it's absolutely necessary that they serve in or with minors, that they always be in the company of somebody who is compliant. Is there anything, Rodrigo, that you want to add to that point, or Anne? Okay.
I think what you said covers it. Again, the point is, because we cannot obtain a complete background check, then we take that security, that safety measure to couple that person with someone who is fully compliant. It's not our intention to limit them, but we need to take into consideration the fact that we're not able to do a full background check.
Wonderful. Okay, very good. And here's my favorite question, because this is the question that we get every single year. Is there a safe environment video that is shown to children and parents? Do we want to guess what the answer is? No, there isn't one. There is no video that is shown to any child, youth, or parent. And I don't know if that was a misunderstanding about a video that was circulating years and years and years ago, and it made Rodrigo famous. It was his call to fame. But that video is not shown to parents and it's not shown to children. Again, the curriculum that we abide and we use in our diocese is the no-go tell. Everything is found in the Safe in Our Diocese website. Please follow that curriculum only and don't deviate from that, because any other alternative videos that you find on YouTube that you may find that would be helpful are not, and that's not what we're asking you to do. So please do not go in search of videos to try to provide that training for the students, which has already been done for you. There might be a question, Rodrigo, which I think would fit nicely in here, which is if there is such a video or a training for parents. And so I know that in previous conversations with Catholic Mutual, we were in discussions about perhaps having one of the videos that's part of the CMG training kind of available a la carte. So aside from having to create a profile on CMG for parents to watch, but I don't know if that has actually come to fruition. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I know we worked on this a couple of years ago. We got hung up on, we wanted to make available the videos that are on CMG, you know, for the clergy and the staff and volunteers that are required to comply. We wanted to somehow make those videos available to parents who would like to see them and are interested in that training, but they're not yet required. So there's a couple of challenges there because, you know, we don't want to have them going to CMG and then expand our database of people who are doing it, and it introduces a question of, you know, who is in compliance, who isn't, and these people don't have to do it and all that. So we wanted to keep these that out of CMG, but we ran into a challenge of you know, how to make those videos available, and the fact that the ones on CMG have an introduction by our bishop, now Cardinal, and the ones that you know, we had available did not. So so we got hung up on that. We can go back and see if there's a way. Now there are new videos, so it's a different one. So we can see if you know, technology have changed and you know, different opportunities exist that we can possibly make those available for parents to see. So we'll work on that moving forward.
Great, thank you, Rodrigo. And the final question of some of those frequent, and this goes back to Ann Noya's point about, just for clarification, if I'm a catechist teaching at a parish, should I select educator when completing my CMG profile? So you should all be able to answer this question. No, please do not select educator, as this designation is only reserved for Catholic school teachers only. So just as you know, again, volunteer is the way to go if you're a catechist. So DCMs, when you're guiding your newly recruited catechist to complete the CMG profile, please advise them to select the appropriate designation and not educator, although they will be teaching students throughout the year. Okay, so those are the most popular questions. I would like to open it up for any outstanding questions that have not been responded to up to this point. So I will ask Joseph or Leticia or Clara to share with us if there's anything that came up in the chat box.
Okay, we have one question that is a great question on what if, you know, who needs to be screened and cleared for safe environment. You know, for example, if someone is only occasionally or once with a group of children, what if they're supervised by other people that are cleared? For example, they gave the example of VBS and situations like that. So we're going to direct that question to Rodrigo.
Okay, thanks, Joseph. And again, you know, just to correct Joseph, not to make it feel bad, but never talk about screening or just training. Always talk about compliance. Everything always goes together, not one or the other. But let me go back to this question. Here's the way that I've always kind of helped or try to help people understand this. If you're a DCM, if you're a youth minister, you know, you're going to try to get volunteers to help you where you need the assistance in your program throughout the year. Anybody that you sign up for this, they're a volunteer, they're on your list, they're on your team for helping with youth, they need to comply, okay? Occasionally, there'll be single events, you need extra help. These people, if you're going to reach out to them in advance, you know they're going to be working with kids, you know there is an opportunity for them to, you know, become compliant, that would be preferable, okay? Every once in a while, we have a parish festival, we have a one-time thing, you know, people show up to help, that's okay, you know, they can help you, but that's a one-time thing. If they join your team as your group of volunteers, the people that you're going to be counting on for help on an ongoing basis, they need to comply, okay? Again, one of the concepts behind this is that anybody that helps at the church, you know, when we put ministers, when we put people that are helping in the name of the church in front of kids and in front of families, the longstanding presupposition is that the church has vetted those people, that they are trustworthy people, okay? And so when you put somebody in front of a child in the name of the church as a minister, that child should be able to trust that person and presume that that's a safe person. So that's what we have to make sure, okay? That's the whole point of this. Now, you know, if it's a one-time thing, you know, it's not a big deal, but if it's an ongoing thing, yes, that person should be a trusted person. The child should be able to trust. The family should be able to trust, and we should have done our homework to make sure that we comply. So that's the concept we should have in our head about people that we put in front of others. When we need help on a one-time basis, all of a sudden we need extra help for this or for that, and we call on somebody, that it's okay. But if they become part of your team, then they need to be in compliance.
Very good. Any other questions, Joseph, Leticia, from the chat? Okay, so there is one here. How do we handle teens who show up after our safe environment training date? Also, we might be attending the National Catholic Youth Conference in Long Beach and staying in hotel rooms. Do adults stay in hotel rooms with teens? So I'll answer the first part. You should make every attempt to offer makeup sessions to ensure that all the students have received the formation within that catechetical year. Again, as Rodrigo had mentioned in his slides, when you receive the statistical report, you're reporting on all of the students that have complied or that have received the training for the previous year. So you want to make sure that you are diligent in providing opportunities to provide that information to the students and to the parents as well. So even if they've enrolled later, perhaps schedule a couple of makeup sessions at the beginning of the new year. So after the Christmas time, before you start the second half, so that at least you have that taken care of. Regarding NCYC, perhaps Maricruz or Rodrigo would like to respond to that.
Why don't you give it a shot, Maricruz?
And then you can correct me if needed. When it comes to hotel stays, that's a little bit tricky because it's not like cabins. Usually we know the cabins, especially the ones here in San Diego County, it's a cabin of at least 10 people per room. So you have a large enough group where if you have one adult, that's fine, you have a big group. Now with hotel rooms, especially for NCYC, I think the most is 4 people per hotel room, and it's the expectation that 2 people, the teens, would share a bed. My recommendation would be to have the adults in the adjacent room or have adults in the rooms at the edges and having the teens in between. So at least there's accountability of adults on both ends, especially if they're on the same floor. The girls are going to be on one floor, the boys are going to be in another one. So it's always good to kind of, the rule of thumb is for hotels be near the rooms, but I would, and it also depends on how many students you're taking as well. But that's my suggestion. I don't know, Rod, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's great. I think that's the point, again, to keep in mind, are we doing the best that we can given the situation? Okay, so when you are in a hotel setting, you're not going to be able to put 10 kids in a room, but the chaperones should be nearby. There should be a sense that they are being watchful, being careful, being caring for the minors, and that they have access to, okay, check on the door at 11:30, make sure they're still there or something, that they might do that, might be able to do that. Okay, so that's the whole thing, to kind of establish a sense of a safe environment, a sense of caring. And again, sometimes you're going to be dealing with situations you cannot control. You do your best. You have, kind of the ideal situation, and sometimes, well, it might be a little different. That's not, again, it's not the end of the world. But you're trying to do your best to kind of watch over the kids and making sure that you do what you can to keep them safe.
Okay, great. And again, if there are any problems with recertification or login information, reach out to your site administrator. If your site administrator is having issues, then that he or she can then contact Nilbert Neng, who will be able to assist further at that time. If there are no other questions, I believe we've answered them all. Again, we thank you for your time. We want to be respectful of the time that we have allotted for the presentation. And again, safeinourdiocese.org for all content, the forms that you need to complete attached to the class roster, so that you can keep those on file and be ready for the prompt whenever that comes to you for the annual statistical report. Okay, very good, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless you all.